So, my friends, welcome to this week's. Oh, well, I'm not sure whether it's been a week or whether it's been longer. It's been kind of busy at the moment. But welcome to the latest episode of the Imperium video blog. Again, we're touching on the subject, as well, of world building. And we're going to touch on a. excuse me, a little bit of a, shall we say, polemic or difficult subject. It's one that's talked about a lot, or one that has one upon which there are many opinions, many schools of thought, many different ideas. Yeah, it looks like I've got a handlebar moustache, but it's because it's grey underneath. My age is showing. I am not developing a handlebar moustache. I just want to tell you that. It looks like one. I've just realised now. But never mind. A handlebar moustache, what do you think? Lovely, eh? But you can just make out the silver there. It just doesn't do very well in this light. But never mind, it goes all the way around. Excuse me. So, it is a polemic, it is a controversial, it is a topic about which there are many opinions, but one that still needs to be faced, especially perhaps in today's world. And that is that of, of social awareness, social structure, or perhaps, as we could call it, politics in your world. Because let's be honest, anyone who is writing a world is creating a world, some of their opinions, some of their beliefs, some of their principles, and those things which guide their formation as a person are going to leak into your writing. It is completely and utterly impossible to avoid. Now, don't jump or leap to the conclusion, as many people online have a habit of doing these days, that I'm talking about supporting a particular side of the great seesaw of the fulcrum of politics which dominates our world today. We're not talking about left or right. We're not talking about certain American politicians or not. We are talking about, I suppose, this is where it gets difficult, and this is what I wanted to talk about. I've spoken to many people online about this, about the difference, because these days it's very hard to tell what I would call humanist principles from politics. Many people have decided to muddy the waters a little bit and make things which to me are basic human decency into matters of political opinion. And I find this challenging. To me, a world where people are treated the same regardless of their gender, regardless of their identity, regardless of their place of origin, the colour of their skin, the colour of their eyes, the clothes they choose to wear, the identity they feel comfortable identifying with, the opinions which they hold, the people whom they like, the people whom they like to socialise with, the music they like, anything at all with which they feel is an identifier of themselves should make no difference as to their value as a citizen or not. It should make no difference at all. And to me, that is not political. That's not political at all. For me, if you fall sick, that you receive medical treatment and are not ruined financially, to me that is not political. To me, that if you're black, white, green, brown, orange, purple, colourless, shouldn't matter as to what rights you receive as a person. To me, the idea of people receiving equal justice regardless of their background is not political. To me, someone being able to identify as something which is not their birth gender or their birth sex or whatever you want to call it, and to be addressed in a certain way by other people, is not political. To me, the religion someone chooses to follow, or whether someone follows a religion not at all is not political. It is humanist. It is a basic human right. And this is a thing I have much difficulty with in my online presence in Twitter and so forth, is this is not a commonly held belief. It is a belief that they say makes me of a left-wing type opinion. And I find this odd, because I don't vote in American politics. I really don't care who wins in American politics, as long as it doesn't spread out to the rest of the world and affect people badly. You know, I have expressed some negative opinions towards a certain prominent American politician due to the fact that many of his policies have been detrimental towards people to whom such negativity is not deserved. And those who read my work will realise I am of a quite egalitarian type opinion. Now, I've been accused of being a communist, I've been accused of being a socialist, I've been accused of many things, but let's be honest, here I am writing a story which I hope will make money and which I hope to make a career from. So I can't really be that communist, can I? I'd be giving it away for free if I was a communist, come on. I am somebody who has lived a long and interestingly varied life, has known people from all backgrounds, from all walks of life, from all lifestyles, from all social, ethnic, and I suppose gender, opinion and belief, and all those things. I can't think of the word right now, but I've known every kind of person you could possibly imagine, every kind of human being that I believe it's possible to meet. I'm sure there are more out there that I haven't met yet, but I've met a great many of them. I've been friends with them, I've worked with them, I have socialised with them. And I'll be honest, I am a great believer in the old song lyric, the old poem, I don't care who you are, here's to your dreams. Basically, everyone has a right to dream, has a right to achieve their dreams, has a right to aspire to their dreams, no matter who, or what, or where, or when, or which, or whom they are. That is my opinion. And if that is political, well, fine. But I don't think it should be. I don't think leaning towards one side or not of the artificially exaggeratedly invented political spectrum has anything to do with what is right and what is wrong, in my opinion. My opinion, right is right, wrong is wrong, regardless of what religion or what political party you choose to show loyalty to. It's kind of like, to me, it's like saying, oh, you're a Liverpool supporter, therefore you must dislike people who eat bananas on Wednesdays. Like, well, why? I'm not a Liverpool supporter instantly before you all get excited. Or that you're a Manchester United supporter, therefore you must support Black Lives Matter because you support Manchester United, who also do. No. I am me, regardless of and irrespective to the fact that I may or may not support a certain football team. I believe what I believe regardless of what the opinion of a candidate for one political party or another may be. I do not formulate and develop my opinions based on what one person of one kind of suit or another, wearing one particular colour of necktie or another, chooses to say is the right thing to believe. I am, and this is coming from a writer's point of view, from an author's point of view, from the point of view of a literally minded person, as in someone who is of the literal world, of the literary world, I am a liberal. Because what the word liberal means in the dictionary is someone who does not follow any particular train of thought, every particular school of thought, but one who goes out there and makes their own. It's someone who is free from the constraints of thought imposed upon people by society. So calling someone a liberal as an insult is actually quite hilarious in my mind, because we, especially we, out here as artists, are here to push the envelope, to think outside the box, to aim for the skies, to push to the stars, to basically follow all the cliches out there when it comes to thinking. We are to challenge the norms, to push new ideas, to come up with something new. And that is something I feel that a great many writers have forgotten in the quest to get sales, to get popularity, to get your numbers up on Amazon or whichever platform you follow. We are not here to churn, to be the machine churning out constant copies of the same. We are the same, we are the same, we are what is popularity, we are popular. We're not a photocopying machine. We're not to use antiquated speech as Xerox. We don't fill the mold and churn out the same old with different colour schemes. To use an idea based on what many of the people who watch these videos and who follow my work are with, because there's a similarity in universe to some degree. We're not the ones who have 1,000, 1,000,000 tabletop miniature wargaming models, who are all the same with tiny differences, and our aim is to paint this character differently or that character differently in order to express our individuality, because in essence we have the same miniature painted in a different way, following a certain scheme or inventing our own, but it's still the same miniature in essence. So do we take what is, in building our world, the commonly accepted, the popular, the lucrative road of churning out on a templated format, the kind of world, the kind of story, the kind of formula which is popular, and just giving the characters different names, different hairstyles, different clothing, slightly different backstories? Or do we take something we see and go out into the far reaches of the universe with it? Now, science fiction, my favourite genre, used to be, the whole idea behind science fiction was to take an idea. Sorry, one of my children my children are fighting over something at the moment. Bear with me a moment. I'll be right back. Sorry about that real world moment there. One of my daughters managed to wet the floor from bathroom water, actually, who was washing her hands and got carried away and fell upon her bum. And she's fine now, you'll be pleased to hear, though she wasn't for a moment. But where was I? Yes, so science fiction has always been about taking what is common, or taking an idea, and in ignorance of the constraints of our current world, seeing just how far we can go with it. To take technology that doesn't exist, to take the idea of aliens and the universe and expand upon it. Fantasy was the same thing. They're about taking the constraints of our world and removing some of them, or taking a firmly entrenched idea in our world and removing it to see what will happen. Idea is it's like dreams, but in the written format that you can share with other people. The idea behind Imperium was to take. It was just one idea. I was reading some book. This was it. Valerio Massimo Manfredi wrote the excellent what's called the Alexander Romance trilogy, which is absolutely brilliant and provided a lot of background. Of course, it romanticized certain elements, and some elements were not historically accurate, for which reason I had to read other drier, less dramatic and interesting versions. But when I was reading that, and when I was reading, because I'm a great fan of the classical period of history, the Greco-Roman period, I was initially fascinated by the Roman period, and then reading about Greek influences in the Roman period, I started to look into the Grecian, the Hellenic period. Excuse me, a little bit of gas, I apologise. And moving backward, I first read the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and then I started to read about Alexander, because Alexander himself was very deeply influenced by his Homer and his Virgil. He really was, but well, not Virgil, no, because Virgil came later. My apologies, but by Homer. It's commonly mentioned that Alexander liked in the paintings of him and the statues of him to recreate poses in which the stars, as it were, of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey often appeared, to model himself upon them, to want to equal or exceed their feats. So he was deeply influenced, and I could see that when I was reading it, and I could also, an idea started to twitch within my head, because, and we'll come back to this, this is going to be related to what I'm talking about, but allow me to digress and go off on a tangent a little bit here. It was the idea that came into my head that, obviously, in Babylon in 323 BC, it is believed, that's precise date, Alexander died from what may have been typhoid, dysentery, poisoning, some other form of assassination attempt, a heart attack, Nile fever, gosh alone knows. But he died, rather unexpectedly, and what he had been building flew apart when all of his lieutenants, all of his supporters, his greatest 5 friends, bickered and battled over divided the empire up between them. We had the Seleucid Empire, we had the Ptolemaic Empire, we had Greece under Perdiccas, we had all kinds of things. And the modern world, which we now see, was shaped by those events. So my thought was, what would have happened had Alexander not died then? If he had continued on his campaign as he had planned? Because his original idea of his campaign was to go from sunrise in the east to sunrise in the east to sunset in the west. I need to get my directions correct, don't I? So, following the theory of that and what is known about the world in his time, Alexander was 33 years old when he died. He could have had at least 15-20 years for the lifespan of someone in that time period, maybe even 30, to continue. He could have gotten as far. Now, in his time, China was known about. His plan was to go all the way to the sea in the west. Now, in a time China wasn't totally unified, we don't know what he would have met in that time period, whether he could have gotten that far. Now, most people thought, when Alexander set out, he wouldn't have achieved anywhere near as much as he did. Admittedly, he was nearly stymied completely in India, and it was just through sheer bloody-minded determination and in part luck that he managed to get his army out of India alive and managed to actually achieve any form of conquest, because they came close to completely losing in India, because they were in an environment which they were not used to, against a type of enemy soldier and tactic they were not used to. Coming up against elephants, they'd never fought elephants before. What would have they fought in China? Could they have won? And let's say in theory they did. But I decided, as I like writing fantasy, and as I wanted to write science fiction, how about something were to happen on the way that made him capable of achieving his plan? Because I sat down and thought about it and realised he could, in theory, with the army he had, conquer the entire world. But look what happens when Alexander dies. It all comes apart, and Alexander sooner or later was going to die, no doubt about it. For people in that time, it was and from the way people were raised and conditioned in his society, it was a hereditary royal bloodline type thing. So if Alexander had have died with heirs, which apparently he had one, they were taken back to Macedonia with his wife and his mother after Babylon, and he could have easily have sent them back for safety, which he does, and we'll come back to that later. His son does get a mention, and his other children, but we'll mention that later. But the idea is, the empire, especially one so large as to go from the far west, which I chose as a west coast of Ireland, because I knew Ireland existed in those times, all the way across to what would have been parts of South Korea, Vietnam, possibly Cambodia, China, in the east, because they hadn't discovered Japan yet. They didn't know that. They just thought they were unoccupied islands and didn't bother with them. To hold that kind of empire together would have required an army, and one thing, a huge army, huge discipline, and a great deal of cooperation and strength. And one thing I learned about studying the Roman Empire, especially The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, which is an excellent book, I enjoyed that greatly, is that empires don't really hold themselves together. It's essentially a federation of feudal kingdoms and, shall we say, treaties between powerful figures with armies. That's what happened with the Roman Republic before it became the empire, and even after it was the empire, it was still not really a unified empire in anything more than tactics, dress, and language. Everyone in different provinces ran things their own way and did what they knew the Caesar would permit them to do, but they were small kings in their own kingdoms. So how could you have a unified kingdom? So I thought, well, in order for Alexander's empire to stay together indefinitely, Alexander himself would have to stay around indefinitely. And the only way in what was a very brutal world ruled by the sword for him to enforce that unity would be to have soldiers that were orders of magnitude better than anything that existed in the entire world at the time. Now, back in the distant times before I even knew what grey hairs were, before I could even grow decent facial hair, I come up with the idea, which would later morph into Alexander. And the idea was that Alexander would be made immortal by a dragon. I had it in that time where it was a more metaphorical dragon that no one appeared to meet. And that's where I was stymied in writing the historical part of it. So I just thought, well, dragons did, they're a common creature in fantasy fiction. And I have to admit that what influenced me the most in some degree in writing The Dragon was a very famous book, A Flight of Dragons. I forget the author now, I should have researched this before doing the video today. But that described why there are no remains of dragons upon the earth, because basically the complicated chemical factory which enabled dragons something of their size and bulk to fly with the little wings without having 20-meter wide wings and flight muscles that would make them, because dragons are big, scaly, bulky creatures. First to fly, and second to breathe fire. That chemical factory which made that possible, upon the death of the dragon, goes critical and combusts, which it would do, the way this author described it. Look it up, Google it, A Flight of Dragons. It was a cartoon, and it was also a fantastically good book. The book was much better, but the cartoon was decent. But that same dragon had the ability to not just metaphorically but literally burn the mortality out of Alexander, to somehow destroy his body and rebuild it. Now obviously the mechanics behind this are never going to be discussed, because we've got to have some sort of mythical understanding. In one way, Star Wars was kind of ruined by taking the mystic side out of and providing a scientific explanation for how Force users become Force users and how some Force users are stronger than others. The whole midichlorian retcon thing I've never been a fan of that. So I'm not going to explain how the dragon can remake people by burning them into ash. That's a mystical side of things. It's mentioned, it's described, but the actual mechanics of it is a secret she keeps in her own mind, because if other people could replicate it, what would they need her for? And she needs people to protect her, because she's the last of her species. Also, maybe she has an agenda of her own. We shall see. So, to cut a long story short, she makes Alexander immortal. She makes 10,000 of his loyalist soldiers immortal, and she makes 300 of his closest and most elite soldiers immortal in a different way. So we have these soldiers who are dressed in dwarf-made, all-enclosing armour, which did not exist in that period of history. We're thinking heavy plate armour, covering every inch of their body, every millimetre of their body. Weapons which can cut through any armour that exists and break the weapons that exist today. Proper steel didn't exist yet, or it wasn't common. It was mainly iron and bronze in that time. And then, steel existed, but it wasn't the steel that we have today. The steel that we have, if you imagine if someone had the steel that we are capable of producing today, they wouldn't stand a chance in heck. And if their armour was made not only of that steel, but of this mythic substance that everyone likes to associate with dwarves called mithril, though I've developed that a little bit, and we'll talk about that another time when we get onto the technology section. These people, these giant soldiers in terrifying armour, are unstoppable as far as soldiers of the day go. You could fire a rain of arrows at them and they would just bounce off of their armour. They wouldn't penetrate. You could swipe at them with a sword and it would just scratch the paint. but one of those soldiers could swing their sword and cut 7 people in half or something similar, because their speed, their reflexes and their strength are also increased. So we came up with the idea of the bloodless conquest, and that is not only because it's a good plot device, but I was looking at trying to look for a reason why the dragon would want to help Alexander achieve immortality and achieve this empire of his, and that was to create peace. And as the famous saying go, all empires are founded upon blood, and all conquered peoples look for a way to fight back. But what if you're conquered in peace? What if just simply being intimidated beyond any way of denial by the possibility, we're talking about the nuclear option here, I suppose, of having a soldier so terrifying, so capable, so unassailable, that people just decide, nope, I surrendered. Please don't send those guys at me. And it worked for thousands of years, because people saw 10,000 Kal Shadar, 300 Dracograth marching with Alexander at their head and thought, whoa, time for war is over, take my weapons please. That in itself is a political statement, you may have noticed, because I am trying to find an option for peace which does not involve lots of war and death, but it is also, for the even smarter amongst you, it may be, depending on how you think about it, showing favour or highlighting a particular ideological or political system. And it is. We will deal with that later, because Alexander has to come to make a decision when he realizes what it is that is controlling the human race, and what it means when superior, greater, better people are controlling what all the human race does. Indeed, I'm trying to be subtle, and maybe you've spotted it. If you haven't now, I've given it away now, haven't I? Excuse me. Again, that is also a statement of some that many people would consider political, though I see it as more ideological. The point of the matter is, my beliefs, my principles, my thoughts are leaking onto the page because it's coming from my mind, it's coming from my imagination. I am forming these characters, these stories, and this universe and this world. Of course, a piece of me is going to form a part of that, because it is impossible, my friends, to write a believable, a deep and involved world, universe, whatever, involving deep, involved, developing, dynamic characters without a part of you and a part of the people who may be in your surroundings and environment flowing into that. You cannot write about a world and a developing world and anything without at least alluding to the world in which you are writing it in. It's impossible. And we have seen ourselves with many writers from the past when they have written and tried to remain apolitical and not make a political statement, or at least they've said that. Tolkien is a good example. Part of the dynamic of the environment, of the social movement of their time has coloured their writing. It doesn't matter whether they meant to do it or not, it still happened. And these same writers have been accused of holding particular political viewpoints, ones which are considered good or ones that are considered bad, depending on what your point of view is. It has usually either been used as a stick to beat them with, or a hand to pat them on the back with. These writers do not care because they are no longer among us. But their work endures and continues. Why? Because many of the social struggles, the social points, the human nature, the human decency side of things don't ever change. Many of the things that we as humans aspire to, we humans like, we which humans seek, are always going to be there. And that is why Shakespeare himself remains relevant 500 to 600 years after his plays were written, because his themes, his ideas, what he is pointing out, what he is giving us to dream of, still applies in today's world, even though our world has changed beyond anything Shakespeare could ever have dreamed of. Essentially, people are people. It doesn't matter in which environment you put them, they will act as people. They may have different experiences, different outlooks, different foundations, but they're still people. And that's the thing that we are trying to point out, that by putting people in extreme situations, in new situations, they're still going to behave like people do. And the same themes, the same stories, the same great tales are going to be repeated time after time, whether we set our stories 1,000 years in the past, 10,000 years in the past, 10,000 years in the future, 1,000,000 years in the future, in a completely fictional galaxy, in a completely fictional world or universe. Because it is a human being doing the thinking, those things which drive human beings are going to be in there. And if you do it well, those things which drive human beings are going to resonate with the human beings who are doing the reading. And that's what makes it a challenge. That's what I'm saying. One cannot avoid making a commentary on one's social standpoint, one's social viewpoint. One cannot avoid making a message which will be, by someone or another, deemed political. Because let's be honest, in today's world, in today's Europe, in today's America, everything has been made political. Whether one wears a mask in public during a pandemic or not is a political matter. Whether one is cautious in a world where a very dangerous virus is running rampant or not is a political matter. Whether one believes that these people or those people are guilty of these crimes or those crimes on this side or that side is a political matter. Let's be honest, there is a dominant conspiracy theory about whom, you know my opinion, who believes that there is an elite, not an elite, again, a global hidden elite which is controlling the world. No one's done that in a conspiracy theory before. But the elite to which they allude is only the elite of one side of the political spectrum. Surely it would be the elite as a whole, regardless of their political affiliation, because that would reveal that politics is in fact a smokescreen for dominating the world and controlling people and making lots of money. So it wouldn't matter which side of the political spectrum you fall upon, you are still one of the elites, therefore blah blah blah. No, that's where it falls over. So, as I am saying, it's impossible to remain apolitical, to avoid being at least considered political in today's world, because somebody somewhere will make it political. Some examples. We've got our LGBTQ plus authors. A growing movement, which I applaud and I think is excellent because it's about bloody time you guys started to represent and educate, because even I who support you guys and I think you guys have every right to live your lives and be allowed to live your lives as you wish and as you can, because it's not about a choice. In the vast majority of cases, it's the way you are. You can't be anything but what you are. In my opinion, that is your human right. Nobody has any right to tell you that you can or cannot live your life that way. But it has been made political. I am married to, in a fantastic relationship with, and have children with, a black Dominican woman. Of course, in my mind, she has as many rights in this world, is entitled to as much, and is entitled to be treated at least as equally as I, her husband, am. But I am aware in this world that is not the case. For me to say that my wife should be treated the same as me has also been made political. For me to say people who in appearance are the same as my wife, have the same colour skin, the same cast of features, the same origins as her, that they are being treated differently because of that, and that in my opinion this should not be the case, is also considered political, when in my mind we're all humans. We are all from the same origin. We are all going to the same place. It should not matter from what ethnic, from what origin, from what gene pool, from what part of the world we are originated. We are in the same world. We are from the same pool of original genes we all came from, were created from, were evolved from the same place. We are all as human as each other. Therefore, it doesn't matter what kind of human you are. You are as human as I am. And I have no right to say that my kind of human is better than your kind of human. And in my opinion, that is morally right. It is not political. It is something that should be complete, basic, common sense and decency. And I'm sorry if you don't agree with that. You are going to hate my writing, which is filled with people of all different ethnicities, different origins, different genders, different beliefs, different ideologies, all getting on just fine and forming a society which is fairly functional indeed, and opposing and, so we may hope, ultimately bringing down societies which wish to prevent them from having the right to do just that. So if you are of an opinion that someone is less human than you because they do not have certain things in common with you, I am sorry, but neither the Imperium cycle, nor the Chronicles of Enoch, nor anything else I write is going to be of enjoyment to you. Or it's going to be damn fine writing. It's going to be a fantastic journey, and maybe it will let you see inside the heads of some of these people about whom you may need to learn a little bit more. Because let's be honest, we know that racism, that sexism that transphobia, that homophobia, that any of these behaviours that discriminate against a person because they either belong or do not belong to a certain group, that they look different to another group, that they act different to another group, that they hold a different ideological or intellectual opinion than one group, that they are of a different religion or they have no religion. Most of the hatred that we see is due to ignorance, due to lack of education about what these people are up to listening to what for want of a better term, is propaganda meant to foment fear in these people. But as soon as you live among these people, as soon as you get to know these people, as soon as you learn more about them, you realise they're just like us. They want to live, they want to be comfortable, to progress in society, have a place to live, enough food to eat. They want love like we do. They may or may not want children like we do. That's their choice. They may wish to adopt. They may wish to use IVF. However they do it. And they want to die in the knowledge that their children will have a better shot at life than they did. That's what every human being on the planet wants, regardless of anything else. And once people get to realise that and realise these people are just like us, their accent is different perhaps, their way of living their life, of expressing their life, of entertaining themselves, of what they're interested in may be different to mine, but essentially what they want is the same. And that's our job as writers, because think about it. Science fiction, fantasy, we often come up with fictional races, and these races experience perhaps some discrimination from another race because of what they are. Racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia. We touch upon these things, whether we mean to or not. But we represent these other races from a human point of view. So we give them human traits. We can't avoid it because we know nothing else. But we may try to make them different in another way and reveal that in spite of this difference, they're the same as the rest of us. Now, I'm going to tie things up here because the girls are going crazy. It's time for them to have their dinner, and I'm holding things up. But like I said, when you're building your world, you are going to infuse the world with your social commentary, with your viewpoints, with your beliefs, whether you mean to or not. And that is why politics is unavoidable in writing. That you are going to infuse it with politics whether you mean it to or not. And even if you make an effort not to put politics in your books, that is also going to be seen as a political point by some of your readers at least. Because in these days it's impossible to avoid being political. I'm sorry, even if you try not to be, some people are going to see that you are. Nothing you can do about that. So that is the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. It's been a little bit longer, but I did get passionate in parts. This is Alan J. Fisher signing off on the Imperium video blog for this week. Thank you, my friends. I love you all. This is a 70s porn star look. I have to just ferment this bit so you can see that it's black. This is me signing off. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for watching. I will speak to you again as soon as I get the free time and the motivation to do so. But I'll try and make it more regular. I promise. I know I keep saying that, but I'm going to do it one of these days. I promise. Thank you. Have a great and wonderful day, and I hope you have enjoyed this. Take care. Goodbye.